stories, how you use them.
T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Okay. Guess what? We have got something very interesting this week, and you were asking about it. There's a lot of earnings reports that came out this week as we're sitting here by basically the middle of May. This week, the topic I've got for you is kind of a question you got, but there's some things in there you didn't ask, but you need to know about your question. It is pandemic stocks. There's been headlines, and some of you noted those. Why are we talking about pandemic stocks right now? Why does it matter, and what's going on? And, where is all this news coming from? Well, I'm going to tell you in a minute because it matters if you're an investor, especially if you're a buy and hold investor, what has happened. So the story that I'm going to teach you is seasonal versus spikes and why sales replication is everything, because it all starts with sales. You could have a spike in the stock price. It's usually driven by sales or market events, market forces that are pointing to sales. So let's go dive in and look at the pandemic stocks and why have they been in the headlines and why replication is everything, and you need to know seasonal versus spike as an investor. First, let's look at some headlines that are out there, such as from Bankrate, post-pandemic problems. These stocks are still down 50% from their COVID highs. COVID high, like something like Zoom, which we'll look at in a second, as I said, and down 50%. That certainly doesn't look good. And from across the pond, the Financial Times, pandemic-era winners suffer $1.5 trillion. That should just be a capital T, but that's the way they talk about it in headlines. Fall in market value. Fall in market value. So it doesn't matter what side of the ocean you're on when you're investing, a fall in market value is bad. So there's these headlines out there. So these are recent. This is this week. This is things that are going on. So let's go take a look. Pandemic winners, where are they now? What happened? What they're talking about is stocks that spiked during the pandemic. And when they were spiking during the pandemic, what we did and what we saw was we jumped on board and we bought them. For instance, take a look at the list. We start with Moderna. They made vaccines. No comment, but it was up 2,377%. Now it's up 600%. This is an example of a stock that, while it had a spike, it increased in value before and after the pandemic. Not a surprise. There was a lot of money in people getting or being forced to buy or being forced to take those vaccines. Then you take a look at Zoom. Zoom, the pandemic happens, it goes up 735%. Why? We're all told to work from home. We're told that we're on lockdown. But now it's down 13% from where it was before the pandemic. It's as if the pandemic never happened and it's just this average, kind of replacement for Skype that we were using now on Zoom. And now, I use FaceTime a lot, but people one-on-one now because Zoom got me back into using FaceTime, believe it or not, where if it's just one person, why bother getting a Zoom together? Then there's Etsy, people buying all kinds of stuff there, kind of this online marketplace. It's up 45% since before the pandemic, but that's over 4 years. Now we go down here, Peloton. Enough said. Everybody was going to lose weight and they got the Peloton. We just did a case study on that, and you can find the link to that case study in the comments down below. 490% up. It's now up 88%. Well, that's also because it's not a very well-run company, in my opinion, and they've got a lot of problems, in my opinion, and it's showing up in the stock price, apparently in the opinion of a lot of investors. So there you go. DocuSign, similar to Zoom. A tool that you use, you can send signatures around and stuff. So if you're working from home, need to send things securely, up 318% during the pandemic. Look at this, down 19%. Then Wayfair, buying more stuff, miscellaneous stuff, up 282% during the pandemic. Now it's down 29%. Look at the shape of the curves and how much they have in common. I mean, the DocuSign curve and the Etsy curve are almost the same shape. And you've got the Peloton curve, looks almost the same as the Zoom curve, including the post-peak little spikette there and being down. Basically, when they say pandemic stocks, this is what they're talking about. These stocks benefited from a spike during the pandemic and did not return to a point where they look like they had steady growth moving along. Well, let's go see what has happened now. Zoom. The revenue growth is now barely 3% a year, which means maybe we didn't need this thing that allowed us to talk to each other. We had FaceTime and other tools, including Microsoft Teams. DocuSign. Now they're a rumored PE target, meaning someone's going to buy them off the stock market. Remember we talked about Peloton? Maybe there's a good asset here that private equity could take, and getting away from the harsh bright lights of the stock market and having to report earnings every quarter, there's something that could be rebuilt here or optimized. Then we get to Peloton. Enough said. Refinancing, restructuring, delisting, PE target. Moderna. Well, shares plummeted 1,700%, but they're still well up over where they were at the beginning of the pandemic. Then Wayfair. They're talking about brick and mortar play. Why? Because people aren't just buying. Now they're talking about competing with IKEA. I don't know if that's a good thing with all this retail contraction going on. And then Etsy. They're up, but the guidance is basically, yeah, we'll get back to you on how it's going. So let's talk about it. What can we learn about this? Okay, that's what's happened, but let's learn something. Seasonal versus spike, or seasons versus spike. Seasons, you can play the wave, but you better know your history. Give me an example. It has to be explainable. The season has to be explainable, like you know why there's a season for the stock. Has to be predictable. You know when the season happens for the stock. Has to be modelable, right? Which may or may not be a word, but like how much and when can you model into the price and the adjustment of the share price? Let me give you some examples. Consumer electronics, they have a big Q4. Why is that? We go back to school. Football's on and we want a brand new TV. Then we have Black Friday to kick off the holiday shopping, and then more gift giving all the way through the end of the year, meaning consumer electronics typically has a big Q4. What's in consumer electronics? TVs and more, phones, headphones, PlayStations, Xboxes, all this stuff. Consumer, big part, that's seasonal. We can explain it, it's predictable, we know when it happens, and we can kind of model what's happening if we want to take that risk and ride the wave of investing on a season. Next, airlines and travel. Q3 is usually big. Q3 is July, August, September. Because what happens at the end of May, early June? School's out. In America, it's summertime. There's not harsh weather, unless you're in the Mojave Desert. But you've got issues there where most Americans just want to go somewhere. They want to go to Disneyland. Don't know why. They want to go to the beach. They want to go places and enjoy it. So travel usually has a predictable, nice wave of seasonal stock price. So these are seasons. Now let's look at spikes. Spikes come out of nowhere. Be ultra cautious or just sit it out. They can be sudden. We don't know maybe why it's happening, or it's happening during COVID, but we talk ourselves into believing that the spike maybe is permanent. You better be ultra cautious making those kind of assumptions when you don't have history. Then, indeterminate length. When is it going to end? When does it go off the cliff? We had no idea when all those states were going to get together and say, that does it, we're raising restrictions, you can go outside and play. Remember when that happened? That wasn't on the calendar like, on March 1st, 2022, we will declare done with lockdowns. You can all go outside. Remember certain municipalities in certain states, or like Florida, where Governor Ron DeSantis had never required it and was very limited, and we were all hanging out anyway, but everything else happened. So you didn't know when those COVID spikes were going to end. Lastly, unpredictable. How much and how high is it going to go? So with these spikes, you just don't know. Let me give you some examples. The pandemic, we were locked indoors, but also meme stocks. A single post tweet ignited a temporal frenzy a week ago for GameStop. Well, that was a 1 week long spike, and if you bought going up and you got caught going down, that stung. You actually lost money when all the frenzy was going on. You'd be better off just making your own post and reading the headlines and being cautious. That is the difference between a spike and a season. A spike, I would say, for investors is pretty dangerous. Seasonal can be predictive for investors, but still, multiple things could cause this season to be different, lower, bigger, shallower, less intense than last season. And that is the difference between season and spike. So these pandemic stocks, if you thought it was permanent value creation, but then it turns out that Zoom came crashing back to earth and it was really just a spike, you got burned. And that's what it was. Because now we only have 3% growth for Zoom after, here we were thinking, oh, it's going to the moon, it's a new business tool, it's here to stay. Nope. FaceTime, Microsoft Teams, they're all back taking their part of the live one-to-one or one-to-many video market, as an example. And that's it. That's what we're talking about. If you like this case study, you can check up some of these from the Biz Doc archive, including one right there on Zoom that goes way back from the Biz Doc archive, so you can learn all about the start of Zoom. Until next time, I am Tom Ellsworth, the Biz Doc, and I hope I left you better than I found you.